On behalf of the City Council, my wife and myself, I would like to thank you all for being here today. I'm proud here in Ocean City we've kept a commitment by so many Americans that we never forget what happened to our nation on September 11th, 2001. Time has passed, but the memories have not faded for any of us. However, we must remember that in just another year or so, our schools will be filled with a generation of young people who have such no memories. It is up to us as community members, parents, and grandparents to ensure those that follow us have an understanding of the terrible act that was inflicted upon our country that day. It's equally important to understand and appreciate how America responded. Sometimes the best way to remember and understand just what happened during such a tragic event is to rely on the accounts of people that were there. Author Andrew Lydon wrote the Gulf War Debriefing book, which included a comprehensive account of what led to the war. The book includes an email from a friend of his who was in New York City at the time of the attacks. Some portions of his emails are as follows. By now you have all heard of the terrible tragedy that has befallen New York City and the United States. I thought I would take a moment to write to you and bring you a first-person perspective of the attacks. First things first, I am fine. I was nowhere near the attack when it took place. In fact, I was actually safely asleep in my bed when the first plane struck the World Trade Center. My alarm clock went off for news radio informing me that a small plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. I was very awake, and wasn't very awake, and it didn't register with me. But a few minutes later, when I heard that a second plane had hit, I jumped out of bed to turn on the television. My instinct told me something terrible had happened, and this was confirmed when I saw the television footage of the black smoke coming from the towers. The reporter said, "Play the tape back." And that is when I saw the plane crash into the tower. When I got to my office, I noticed people were coming out of the building rather than going up. I decided to head up to the office and use the phones and find out more about what had happened. I found 10 messages from friends and colleagues around the world, and I struggled to find out more information about what was going on. As I walked into my office, my secretary hastily ran past me saying, "I'm out of here." A colleague came rushing in to tell me that the World Trade Center was now gone. This hit me really hard. I felt that something so familiar just couldn't be destroyed. I just visited the World Trade Center on Sunday, and it was something I saw nearly every day. I decided to leave my office in Midtown and walk home. When I saw the news that a passenger airlines had been used in the attacks, it made me sick to think of the innocent civilians who were doing nothing more than crossing the country on an airplane ride. It was a truly beautiful day in New York, and no one started this day thinking it would end in tragedy. I watched with shock and anger and horror as the news reports showed people jumping out of the World Trade Center to escape the flames. These were bond traders and lawyers and janitors and waiters, not exactly military targets. The email to Andrew Lydon goes on to describe the heartbreak of the next few days of his friend as he wanders about New York. On Friday, I went to pay respects to the fire stations that are near my house. At the first station, I lit 2 candles and left some flowers for the men of Engine 54, Ladder 4, just around the corner of 48th and 8th Avenue. Every night I sleep, these firemen would wake me up with the sirens as they drove past my house. Tonight was rather silent at the station. This station lost 15 firemen and their ladder truck, which was destroyed in the blast. Because the attack took place at 9 in the morning, the fire departments were changing shifts. Thus, most stations had double the number of firemen. They all overloaded their fire trucks on the way down to the World Trade Center. A huge pile of flowers and candles covered the driveway, and pictures drawn by local children covered the walls, with words like, "Thank you for being brave." One had a picture showing a fireman catching the people jumping out of the building. One showed a policeman and a fireman standing tall over the city with the caption, "The Twin Towers of the City," referring to the firemen's and policemen's bravery and courage. One sad note, this station was an orphan son of a fireman. There was a little boy about 5 sitting on the bumper of the remaining engine, who told people, my father likes to save people. Unfortunately, his father has not returned. And then went to see the men of Engine Company 23, about 2 blocks north of my house. This engine was also lost, and an old rusting 1970s fire truck was in the station to fill the gaps. 6 men from this station were lost in the tragedy, and we left more flowers and candles with the firemen from Boston who were manning this station. My next stop was a family service center at the New York National Guard Armory. This was horrible. All around the building were quickly made missing signs with photos and information about people lost in the World Trade Center. Family members were holding pictures and begging everyone they could find out for information on their lost relatives. Some of the pictures were funny. One even showed an elderly man standing next to an elephant. I guess it was the best picture they had of him, but also helped people remember his name. Other photos were tragic, and a picture of the fathers and mothers holding their children. I also noticed a Chinese woman holding her baby, walking around with an anguished face as she handed out flyers of her husband's picture. It was so sad to see this young child who would grow up without a father. Pictures scared me because they looked like everyone. They were fat and thin, pretty and ugly, black, white, Chinese, Hispanic, middle class, educated and upper class. They were janitors and lawyers, people from all over the world. As the World Trade Center crash affected many people from many countries. One photo showed a brother and sister who were missing. Another had a husband and wife. For each person missing, there were dozens of loved ones who have broken hearts, and some children will never know their parents. I was teary-eyed for hours after this as we went home for the night. Saturday started with a visit to Engine 31, down around Times Square, and across the street from St. Francis. Father Judge was the fire department chaplain who lived with the friars and rode with Engine 31 to the fires. His story was incredibly tragic. One of the first firemen to die at the World Trade Center was a young man rushing into the building. A woman had jumped from the 100th floor and landed on the fireman. Father Judge and the deputy fire chief went to his aid. Seeing that the stricken fireman had already died, the priest took off his helmet to administer last rites. That was when he and the deputy chief were hit by falling debris and killed. The firemen grabbed Father Judge's body and carried him to a nearby church. They then, very delicately, laid his body on the altar of the church and went back to deal with the wounded. After the building collapsed, the men of Engine 31 grabbed Father Judge's body and took him back to the station where he would be safe, placing him under their bunk and inviting the priest from across the street to pray. The reverence that showed to Father Judge was something I will always remember when I think about this tragedy. I should also note that Engine 31 lost 6 firemen who left flowers at this station as well, and they then decided to head to the